Most of us hear people all day long, but listening isn't competing with silence. It's competing with our own thoughts. While someone is speaking, the mind is already active. It can even happen while you're listening to this, jumping ahead, deciding whether you agree, or quietly preparing what you might say in response. You might even notice a brief impulse to respond or to comment before the thought is fully landed. Just noticing that impulse is where active listening actually begins. Because active listening isn't about trying harder. It's about noticing where attention drifts and gently returning to it. In this video, we're going to look at 6 common patterns of internal noise that quietly weaken your listening and why recognizing them is what actually improves your listening skills. I'm Stephen Walters, and I help people communicate with clarity and calm in conversations that matter, especially when the mind doesn't want to stay still. The first pattern is subtle. It doesn't look like distraction. Attention is present, but direction is not. Phones are down, eye contact is there, posture looks engaged, but internally, attention isn't actually pointed at the other person. Instead, it's split. Part of the mind is tracking what's being said. Another part is judging how you're coming across. Another part is scanning for where this conversation's going. In everyday terms, this often looks like nodding along while quietly organizing a response, or following the story but primarily listening for your turn rather than for meaning. The person speaking can usually feel this, even if they can't name it. The conversation moves forward, but something subtle doesn't quite connect. This kind of listening feels efficient. You stay involved, you keep up, but over time, it erodes understanding. Nuance gets flattened. Context gets lost, and people begin to sense that they're being followed, not actually received. What's easy to miss here is that nothing wrong is happening. There's no obvious failure, just a quiet misalignment between presence and direction. The next shift often feels thoughtful, even intelligent, but it narrows understanding more than we realize. Understanding is replaced by interpretation. Once attention splits, the mind fills in the gaps. Someone describes a challenge, and internally we translate it into something familiar. This is really about stress. They're just frustrated. I've heard this before. Interpretation often comes from experience. It's not careless, but it moves faster than understanding. You respond to what you assume they mean instead of what they actually said. The reply sounds thoughtful, close, but slightly off. In the moment, interpretation feels helpful. It gives you something solid to respond to. Over time, it narrows what the other person feels safe expressing. They start adjusting their words in anticipation of where you'll land. That's often when you hear, "That's not what I meant." Understanding usually arrives a little slower than interpretation, and it needs room to do so. What follows this pattern is even subtler and often feels like empathy from the inside. Emotional matching becomes emotional leading. Here, internal noise shows up as emotional momentum. Someone shares frustration or disappointment, and we quickly match the feeling. That's so frustrating. I'd be upset too. That's unbelievable. It sounds supportive, and often it's meant that way. But emotional matching can quietly become emotional leading. Our reaction becomes the emotional center. The tone shifts, and the speaker begins responding to our energy instead of staying with their own experience. In the moment, this feels connecting. The conversation feels alive. Over time, the emotional center shifts. The speaker may feel validated, but not fully understood. Sometimes the original feeling changes, not because it was resolved, but because the emotional tone changed. Emotion doesn't need to be driven to be acknowledged. Now, the next pattern shows up most clearly in capable, solution-oriented people. Resolution arrives before meaning has settled. Here, internal noise takes the form of usefulness. A challenge is described, and almost immediately, options appear. Suggestions, reframes, solutions. In professional settings, this is often rewarded. In personal conversations, it can feel different. Someone explains something they're still sorting through, and before they've located what it means to them, the conversation shifts to what should happen next. The solution may even be accurate, but meaning hasn't settled yet. In the moment, this feels efficient, competent, but over time, the speaker can feel rushed, quietly unseen. Resolution without meaning can feel like being moved along before you've arrived. Understanding doesn't slow progress. It keeps from wobbling later. When conversations stretch over time, another pattern begins to surface. Familiarity replaces curiosity. With people we know well, internal noise becomes an assumption. Over time, we build mental profiles. We know how they usually think, what they tend to worry about, how they typically respond. And gradually, curiosity softens. You hear the beginning of a sentence and assume you already know where it's going. You're not really listening for something new. You're listening for confirmation. It saves effort in the moment, but over time, you're reacting to the version of them you already know, not the one sitting in front of you. They start to feel predictable, even to themselves, and you stop meeting who they are now. The person speaking may feel like they're repeating something or working harder than necessary to be heard. Staying curious doesn't require intensity. It simply means allowing the person in front of you to surprise you, even slightly. And then there's the most invisible pattern of all. Silence is treated as a gap to fill. Many conversations are shaped less by words than by what happens between them. Pauses, hesitations, moments where someone is still finding language. When silence appears, internal noise often turns into discomfort. We rush to fill it out of politeness, out of momentum, out of the urge to keep things moving. We add a thought, ask a question, offer reassurance. But silence is often transitional, not empty. In everyday conversations, this can look like responding, just as the other person is about to continue. The thought that was forming never fully arrives. In the moment, filling silence keeps things moving. Over time, it interrupts depth. Some of the most important parts of what people say arrive just after a pause, once they feel there's room to finish thinking. Sometimes listening simply means letting the thought finish. Now, bringing it all together, across all of these patterns, one theme runs through them. Listening isn't primarily about effort. It's about availability. Availability to let a thought finish forming. Availability to let understanding arrive before response. Availability to notice when your mind moves ahead of the moment. None of these patterns make someone a poor listener. They're signs of a capable mind operating on momentum. The shift isn't about doing more. It's about doing less, more precisely. So the next time you notice one of these patterns happening in real time, that's the moment the skill becomes real world. Pause for a moment. Which of those patterns stood up most clearly for you? That recognition, quiet and unforced, is usually where listening begins to change. If one of those felt familiar, there's another conversation worth having about what's happening when you feel like no one is listening to you. We'll take that at the same steady pace. I'll see you there.